Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I will be doing a ranking of all of the A Song of Ice and Fire books by George R.R. Martin. I should preface this by saying I recently got into this series, and I have very mixed thoughts on the series as a whole. This is not one of my overall favorite series because I actively dislike a lot of the decisions that Martin has made. However, I do really like a lot of the decisions that he made in other areas, and so I still enjoy elements of this series. And this is why you don't see too many A Song of Ice and Fire videos on my channel, but I did one recently on A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which I thought was a brilliant book, and I wish we had more books like this in fantasy. This is exactly where the genre needs to go in its storytelling qualities, and I wish we had more. And since this isn't really a part of the overall Song of Ice and Fire series, I won't include this. However, if I could have included this, this would be up there among the top 1 or 2 spots for me, as I highly enjoyed this book a lot. But I will specifically be talking about the 5 released books in the Song of Ice and Fire series, and George Martin, please finish the last 2, simply so we can get an ending, because this is a bit of a crazy long time to wait. So, book 5 on my ranking is A Feast for Crows. This is the only book in the series that I actively dislike. And I'm really sad about that because when I heard the pitch for this book, I thought that this would be my favorite. When I heard the pitch was he was splitting books 4 and 5 up. Book 4 would focus on King's Landing. Book 5 would focus on the Wall and on Daenerys over in Meereen. And I thought, brilliant. I love the events of King's Landing. I know that Jon and Dany and Samwell Tarly and Davos, all that stuff is like the important stuff for the series, for the overarching story, particularly in the show as well. But for the books, particularly, I loved reading everything that had to do with King's Landing, and also in the show, I also quite enjoyed the King's Landing plot lines, at least in the first few seasons. And so I was super excited to get to this book. And then all of a sudden, this book really isn't about that. Yes, there are Cersei point of views in this book, but overall, this book does not deliver on its promises at all. There is a lot of King's Landing storyline, but it's not exciting. There's not active, fun things happening. It's very depressing, more depressing than anything else in the series. Not much of importance is happening, I'll say. And in addition to that, there are so many new characters and new plot threads and new everything that happens in this book, and it was all unnecessary. Unless he is pulling some huge fake out, and in the final 2 books, the series is taking a wild turn that we're not expecting. A lot of the development in this book was unnecessary, and I was very disappointed in that. I was highly disappointed in the development of this book, and so this was the only one I did not like. Then we have number 4 on my list is A Dance with Dragons. This one I feel kind of neutral about. There were some moments of this book that I thought were really, really good, and there were some moments of this book that I thought were not good, and I thought the overall book was just a meh feel. I thought that with this book, the good parts included all of the Daenerys storyline that was happening, as well as some of the other tertiary moments that had to do with, Jorah Mormont and Tyrion trying to get to Daenerys. I thought that stuff was all great. I highly enjoyed all of those point of view chapters. However, I did not care at all about what was happening on the Wall. I did not care about Jon Snow or Stannis or anything that was happening there. I thought it was quite slow, and I think that this book is one that could be substantially cut down in storyline, and this one I was just like, I found myself racing through some parts of it and really wanting to get to better parts. And then when I got to the parts I liked, I was like really invested in them. And so I felt on this book. It's not bad. It's not as bad as A Feast for Crows, but it's not a good book. The next on my list, my number 3 spot, and this was my number 3 and my number 2 go back and forth in my mind quite a bit because there are things that I like about them both that sometimes will make them move higher or lower. But book 3 is A Storm of Swords, and this book was when the series started going in a direction I didn't really want it to go, and that was with the focus of Jon Snow. In the TV show, Game of Thrones, I think that Jon Snow is fantastic. I think that his character development is brilliant. I think that they did an excellent job with him. And the story is much the same, but I feel like it just doesn't work for me here, where it does in the TV series really well. The other part of this book that I really enjoyed was all of the maneuvering with the whole planning for the Red Wedding, which I knew was coming. I just didn't know at what point in the book it would happen. And so when it came up, I was like, ooh, that is huge. And then you have the Purple Wedding towards the end of the book, which I thought was really well done. Although I don't know if they call it that for the book or just the show. But the Purple Wedding was also excellently done. And then I also really loved everything in this book having to do with King's Landing and all of the political battles, all of the maneuvering that happens. It's all great. Some of the things I didn't like, I thought Daenerys had a better storyline in this book than in any of the other books, but it just is up to par. And what really ultimately keeps this book from being in the top 3 is the Jon Snow plotline, as I mentioned earlier. But I think that this book is a good book. I think it's a dramatic improvement from a Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons. And so I think this was a very well done book. My number 2 is also the second book in the series, and that is A Clash of Kings. And this was the book that I thought, oh my goodness, Tyrion is great. Because Tyrion jumped up as a fantastic character in this book, and even though I do not like the stuff with Shae, his leadership in King's Landing was great in this book. The preparation for dealing with Stannis, the way that Tyrion maneuvered all of the members of the small council against each other was great. The way that he prepared even to fight his sister Cersei was great. I mean, just everything that was set up in this book was great, and this book paid off a lot of promises from the first book and also made a lot of promises for the future. And the War of the Five Kings is really the concept that I love the most in the series, other than the stuff in my favorite book. And I highly enjoyed this book. At the time, I was a bit frustrated with the sexual elements of this book, as I am with the whole series, which is why it's now one of my favorite series. But over time, the regular parts of this book, the plots of this book are excellent. I will say, I could have done without the Daenerys plotline in this book, but that's just me. But going to my number 1 book, and the book that stands head and shoulders above all the other books in this series, is the first one, the OG, the one that started it all, A Game of Thrones. This is the only, in my opinion, great book in the series. The reason I think that this is such a well-done book is because of Ned Stark. Ned Stark is one of the best characters to be written in fiction. And he is the reason I started reading this series, because I knew there was political intrigue, but I heard when they cast Sean Bean in the show, I thought, I'm interested in that. And when I read the books, I was loving the character, and unfortunately, I was spoiled on how this book ends, but I was still thinking this book might be entertaining, and I was so enthralled with everything. This book has an excellent mystery to it. It has excellent world building. It has great political maneuverings. It has this medieval feel that a lot of fiction and fantasy is missing. You know, we get a lot of medieval storylines, but they're not high action adventure. They're more either romance or they're just historical fiction. And then you have fantasy books, which are technically set in medieval storylines, but they focus so much on the magic that the medieval type of storyline that it's supposed to tell, the political king versus king, army versus army, is kind of diluted. This book nails all of that. it just has so much sexual elements that it keeps it from being in my top fantasy books of all time. But the political maneuverings in this book were brilliant. The plot of this book is my favorite. I thought that everything with Ned Stark and with all of his children, and how you see all the plot lines start in one cohesive place and then slowly are expanded out, and you see the series expand. And then in the TV show, it all wraps back up together. And I like that concept of it starting from one and then expanding and then ending back in that one place. And so I'm hoping that the last book does that, if A Dream of Spring ever comes out, and if Winds of Winter ever comes out, which I don't believe they actually will. But overall, I love this book, and it's reason why it's number one. But A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms gives it really good contention for the top spot. Maybe this is the second spot or third spot, but I highly enjoy this book. And so that is my ranking of the 5 books in the Song of Ice and Fire series. If you've read this series, let me know what your rankings are. What were your favorite plot threads and characters to follow? Which characters could you have done without? Which characters did you really enjoy reading? Let me know all that in the comments. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel. But until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.